We're now on Daf Zayin Amid Beis. Amar Papa wants to answer this question, and he says, Kigon Shoyu Muflam Shneim. That either the Bezdin was represented by a Mufla, or I should say, and the Kohen Mashiach was also a Mufla, and therefore everything is hunky dory, and they'll bring a chatos, a parle chatos. Sovra Baila Neymar. What's that case? The Yasui B'Shnei Makomos. For some reason, I don't know why, Abai thinks that if they sat in two different places, the Bezdin was in one place, one location, and the Kohen Mashiach was in a different location, for Komori B'Trei Yisuri, and let's say the court was ruling on a case of Chelav, and the Kohen Mashiach, was ruling on a case of Dam. So therefore, it's called Chatu B'fnei Atzmo, V'yosa B'fnei Atzmo. Amalei Rava says to Abai, I don't get it. Otu Shnei Makomos going. Well, who cares whether it's two Makomos? El Afilu Yasu B'chad Makom, as long as it's came into Komori B'Trei Isuri, if they're each ruling in different Isurim, that's enough to set up Chatu B'fnei Atzmo. Who? The Gemara says, Pshita, who? What is this case where they came up with two different Isurim? Who bechelav v'heim b'avodas kol chavim? That for sure is chatu b'fnei atzmo. Tu chalukim b'tamayu. Right? This is a whole different parsha over here. You know, you can't compare chelev to avodas kol chavim. And Rashi says that these two isurim of chelev and avodas kol chavim are derived from two different psukim. So this Rava says, or maybe it's just the stomach of the Gemara, that this is chalukim b'tamayu. What does it mean, chalukim b'tamayu? Right, that there are two different parshios here. One is the parsha of Chel, the other is parsha of Avodah Zarah. They have different reasonings. V'chalukim b'karbana. To who b'par v'heim b'par v'soyer. So if we're talking about the Kohen Mashiach, he brings a par for the sin of eating chelev. The tzibur will bring a special korban for violating avodah zarah, which is an olah, a par li olah, and a chatos, which is a soy lechatos. All this is in Bamidbar Perek Tezvav. Fine. To haka maisu hani soyer v'hulo maisi. In other words, the common denominator here between him, the Kohen Mashiach, and the community is going to be a par. But it's still called Chalukim B'Korban Oseyem because the community, in addition to the par, has to bring a soyer. He doesn't have to bring a soyer, the Kohen Mashiach. How much more so if, let's say, the Kohen Mashiach ruled permissively in a case of Avodah Zarah, and the Tzibur, meaning the Bezdin, ruled permissively in a case of Chelev. The Chalukim B'Korban Oseyem legamre. Tehu se'ira v'inu par. Se'ira is a female goat, and that's what he will bring. But the tzibur will bring a par. Elahu b'chelav ha'machasas hakerev Behem b'cheva shaladakim, right? There are different parts of the body, and there's chelev that covers the kerev, which is the kishkis, and then there's chelev on top of the intestines, which is called the dakin. Mao, what's going to be the din in this case? Mi amrin afagav the korbanim shaveh. Right, each of them is going to bring a par, but cave on the misrei kroi asu hapalgina b'tamayu. Since these two isurim are derived from two different psukim, and therefore each violation, each avera has its own distinct reasoning, so the kol meshuach is considered that even though he needs a par and the tzibras bring a par, but he can't achieve kapara through the par of the tzibur. Oh, Dilma, should we say no? Even though the Kohen Mashuach issued a verdict, a ruling that permitted chelev, and the Bezdin issued a ruling, a mistaken ruling that was matir avodah zarah, and therefore the logic of Palgina and Bitamayu still is very powerful. Or should we say no, Shem Chelev Echad, even though there was the Chelev ala Kerev and there was a Chelev on the Dakin, nevertheless we're going to say Shem Chelev Echad. Right, all these different cases and different types of Chelev, they're all subject to the same kapara through the carbon helim davar shel tzibur. Now the Gemara asks the following question: Imtim Salam Hashem Chelev Echad, according to your last side, who bechelev vehem b'dam mao? What about chelev and dam? Chelev and dam can hardly be considered shem echad. They're two psukim and two isurim. Mi amrina b'tamayu hu ha'palginon. Right, they each have their own logical reasoning behind them, so therefore he'll have to bring the carbon of a yachid. O dilma, shall we say keva the shavin the carbon basar carbon azlinon? Since in both cases they are both chayve krisus, and if they were violated b'shogeg, then you bring a carbon chatos, a kizbar sira. Is that itself is enough to combine them together, and therefore he would be miskaper with the carbon helim davar shel tzibur. Teku, we don't know. Shein bezn chayovin ad sheyoru levatel miktsas ulkayim miktsas. Min nolan ad sheyoru levatel miktsas ulkayim miktsas. What's the source for this? Can amrina beikar perikim? We said in the first parak. Benelam davar v'lo kol aguf. V'lo kol aguf means not in a case where they remove and undermine the entire corpus of the halacha. The Mishnah says, "V'chein Mashiach min nolan." How do we know that the same rule applies to the Kohen Mashiach? Tichsiv li ashmas ha'am. Right, the Kohen Mashiach is described as the guilt of the people. Is Harei Mashiach Tzibur. That means that we compare the Mashiach, who's described as Ashmas Ha'am, to the Tzibur itself. Below Bavodas Kochavim. Meaning, if the court undermines the entire goof of Avodas Kochavim, then there's no carbon, there's no kapara. We know Tanarabbanan the fishi yatsa Avodas Kochavim ladun bi'atzmo. Okay, so this is This is the case where the community committed adultery as a result of the horos tos of the court, and they have to bring a korban olah, which is a shar, and a korban chatos, which is a sa'ir, a he goat. And for any other communal sins, they bring only the parahel and davar shel tzibur, which is a chatos. Yachol yu chayovin ala kiras mitzvah kula. Maybe we should go even so far as to say that if they undermine the entire mitzvah that's still included in this parasha, nemar kan me einei, v'nemar lahalon me einei, ma lahalon bebezdin, af kan nami bebezdin, u'ma lahalon davar v'lo kol davar. So again, we have a gzeir shava me'einei me'einei, and that's going to give us an equation between an erroneous ruling of the Bezdin and our pasuk with regard to a kol that violates avodah zarah. It doesn't say explicitly that the special offering is brought when the court issues a permissive ruling and the community follows it. It states in nesta. So the eyes of the congregation did the sin. The eyes of the congregation. That would seem to be the people. But this Gzeirah Shava teaches us that the korban for Avodah Zarah is included in the same manner as the korbanos of the tzibur. And with regard to the korban of the tzibur, it's when you have a horah plus a maisa. So therefore, in the Ene Ha'eda, with regard to Avodah Zarah, once again, it's going to be that the judges on the Bezdin made a mistaken ruling, and they permitted something which is awesome. Umalahal davar v'lo kol aguf. Right, this kind of a communal error only applies when the Bezdin doesn't remove the entire entity. Is afkan here too as well. Nami davar v'lo kol aguf. The korban is only brought if there was an error in some sort of halacha, but not for uprooting the entire corpus of the law. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis. Ein chayivin alel helem davar im shigas ma'aseh v'chein hamashiach v'lo b'avodas kochavim. Ein chayivin alel helem davar im shigas ma'aseh. So the Gemara asks me, Nolan, how do we know this? The Tanur Rabbanan. We learned in a brisa that when it says the word yishku, that means an inadvertent error. Yachol yu chayovin al shigas maisa. Talmud lomer yishku v'nelam davar ein chayovin al helim davar im shigas maisa. Mishnah says v'chein Mashiach minolan d'chsiv liashmasam harei Mashiach ketzibur. That's the emphasis on the word am. V'lo b'avodas kol chavim el al helim davar im shigas maisa. So the case of Avodah Zarah is where there was an oversight on a matter of the laws of Avodah Zarah. It was accompanied by an act of Shogeg Minon. The Tan Rabban Lefishi Yotza Avodas Kol Chavim Lodun Bi'atzmo Yachol Yu Chayav in Al Shigas Maise Nemar Kan Meinei Nemar Lahala Meinei. We have a Gzeir Shava Ma Lahala Ein Chayavin Ella Al Helem Davar. So number one, you had the first condition that there was a mistaken ruling, and Shigas Maisa, where they followed that ruling. Afkan here too in the case of Avodah Zarah, Ein Chayav El Al Helem Davar Im Shigas Maisa. The Mishnah says that Ve'ilu Mashiach B'Avodas Kol Cham Lo Ktani. The Mishnah doesn't mention a word about the Mashiach with regard to Avodah Zarah. Is there for Masnisa Mani? We have a couple of choices. Who is the author of the Mishnah? Is it Rebbe? The Sanya we learned in the Brayso Mashiach B'Avodas Kol Chavim Rebbe Omer Shigas Maisa. Rebbe held that all you need is Shigas Maisa in the case of Avodas Kol Chavim. Chacham Omer Behelim Davar. So it's not just Shigas Maisa, but the Chacham say it's also got to be a mistaken ruling. It's called Helim Davar. Vishavin, but Rebbe and the Chacham agree, Shebeseira, that the carbon that's brought for Avodah Zarah is a female. It's a she-goat. Vishavin she'em meviyim Hashem Tolui, and there's no Hashem Tolui because, as we said before, there's no Hashem Tolui for the Tzibur. And our Mishnah doesn't bother comparing Kohen Mashiach to the Tzibur with regard to Avodah Zarah. And it would seem to follow Rebbe's opinion that in the case of Avodah Zarah, the Kohen Mashiach is treated the same way we treat an average person. And he incurs a chiyuv karbon even for a mere act of inadvertence, meaning just for being shogeg. And the Gemara rejects it. V'tizbara, v'zdono kores uv'shigos o chatos. We're going to have a Mishnah later on Daf Ches that mentions a stipulation that the communal offering for idolatry is only incurred when the intentional violation is punished with kares, and the unintentional violation is subject to a chatos. Mikatani, does the Mishnah teach us that the same ruling applies to a Kohen Mashiach? No. And yet, we know that the same law does apply to a Kohen Gadol. Tmi hachi, rather you have to read it like this. Hu adin laha, achinami tana ha, hu adin laha. So let's just see a few more lines and then we'll have to end. My time of the Rebbe. What was the logic of Rebbe and of the Chacham that rejected Rebbe? Amar kra v'chipera kohen al nefesh. Question is how we interpret the word ha-nefesh. Hashogeges b'chet'a b'shgaga. Ha-nefesh. Okay. Ze Moshiach. Hashogeges ze Nasi. So it means that in the case of Avodah Zarah, the Kohen Mashiach and the Nasi will bring the same identical carbon as anyone else. B'cheta b'shgaga, Rebbe Sovar, chet ze b'shkoga yehe. So we're going to judge the avodah zarah as a shkoga, and therefore requires a karma. Rabban and Savri may mi shechatoso b'shkoga yotza Mashiach she'ein chatoso b'shkoga ela behelim davar. Okay, then let's just see. Yeah. So I think we'll stop here in the bottom of Daf Zayin and Beis, and the Mirza Hashem tomorrow we'll go on to Daf Ches. Have a great day.